Imagine a language so old. Every star in the sky has shifted since it was last spoken. A code that defeated the brightest minds of hundreds of worlds until one human walked in and heard it, not as numbers, but as a living voice calling from beyond space and time. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The stellar archives drifted above the glowing heart of the galaxy, a ring of crystal and metal wrapped around a slow-turning star. From a distance it looked delicate, almost fragile, but up close it felt endless, lined with light-filled halls and quiet chambers where hundreds of species hunted for meaning in the dust of forgotten ages. Lena Rao stood alone on one of the arrival platforms, clutching a small bag and a thin data slate. She had imagined this moment for years, yet now that she was here, her throat felt dry and her palms were damp. Human ships had only been welcome in this region for a few generations. Compared with the elder species, humanity was still new, impatient, and, in the eyes of many, rather naive. A tall figure approached, gliding smoothly on a hovering platform. Its scaled body shimmered in shades of blue and violet. 6 flexible arms folded in formal greeting. A crest of soft plates framed its narrow face, shifting color with subtle changes in mood. "Lena Rao of Earth," the translator band at her wrist murmured, echoing the melodic sounds in a calm, neutral voice. "I am Sorvak, Senior Curator of Deep Histories. The Council is waiting. Thank you for welcoming me," Lena replied, trying not to stare at the slow, hypnotic patterns flowing across Sorvak's scales. "I'm honored to be here. The archives welcome all seekers of knowledge," Sorvak replied. The tone was polite, but something in the rhythm suggested distance. However, some questions have been asked for a very long time. Expectations can be sharp. They moved through broad corridors where gravity shifted gently, and the floor's bright paths curved like rivers of light. Scholars from many worlds glanced up as Lena passed. Some looked curious, others indifferent, and a few wore expressions she read as mild annoyance. She wondered how many of them had argued against inviting a human at all. Sorvak led her into a spherical chamber. Its walls were covered with floating panels, each displaying dense patterns of symbols. At the center of the room hovered a structure of translucent crystal, shaped like a twisting lattice of branches and loops. It glowed with a faint golden light, and along its surfaces millions of tiny symbols flowed and rearranged themselves in slow motion. "Lena Rao of Earth," Sorvak announced, voice amplified softly. "The invited consultant has arrived." Around the edges of the room sat 12 senior scholars, each from a different ancient civilization. A thin being made of layered membranes, a cluster of softly chiming crystals, an insect-like figure with folded wings, a cloud of shimmering gas held within a field of light. Their shapes were varied, but their gazes shared a similar weight, cautious, measuring, expectant. "Welcome," said a soft, echoing voice from a pale, almost transparent humanoid near the front. "I am Mavir, chair of the council. You stand before the Aurelian lattice, the most complex artifact of the vanished makers." Lena looked at the lattice and felt a shiver travel down her spine. She had seen recordings and simulations, but the real thing was different. It felt alive, as if the light inside it were breathing. Mavir continued, "For 3,000 years we have attempted to understand the symbolic system inscribed upon this structure. We have identified thousands of repeating shapes, grouped them, counted them, traced their positions. We have tested mathematical models, physical models, semantic models. Every approach leads to fragments, but never to a stable whole." An insectoid scholar clicked their mandibles gently. The translator rendered the sound as words. "Our pattern engines have tested hundreds of millions of possible interpretations. None are consistent across the full lattice. And now we are told a short-lived human wishes to help." The room grew quiet. Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she met the insectoid's many-faceted eyes without looking away. "I don't imagine I will solve in a day what you have worked on for centuries," she said. "But sometimes a different way of looking can shake loose something that was stuck." Sorvak gestured toward the swirling symbols on the panels. "Our records include every known artifact from the makers, every fragment bearing their language. You have studied some of these." "Yes," Lena answered. "Your team sent me copies. He spent a year with them. Then you know our conclusions, Mavir said. The symbols do not fit any known structure of speech or code. If there is meaning here, it hides behind a wall our minds cannot pass. Lena walked slowly around the Aurelian lattice, watching the shifting symbols. Some rose and fell like waves. Others repeated in bundles that felt like refrains. She could not explain why, but the patterns made her think of music, of stories, of layered memories. May I see all the other artifacts at the same time? She asked, not as lists, but together. Like a sky full of stars. Several council members exchanged skeptical glances. We have already run full correlation maps, the insectoid scholar said. Every symbol, every position, every combination. Not as numbers, Lena interrupted gently. As shapes and flows. I think this language is not meant to be read as a line. I think it is meant to be felt as a pattern. Sorvak's scales shifted to a muted violet of curiosity. There is a chamber that can show what you describe, he said. It is used for high-order physics. Not for language, Lena smiled. Maybe the makers did not separate the two. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Mavir inclined their head. Very well, the chair said. Show our guest the resonance chamber. If nothing else, we will have tried every path. Sorvak gestured toward the exit. Come, Lena Rao of Earth, he said. Let us see how your eyes draw lines between our stars. The resonance chamber lay deep within the archives, behind layers of security fields and quiet warnings. As they descended, the walls grew darker and the air cooler, the bright colors of the upper halls fading into a soft, smoky gray. This facility was built to explore unstable probability fields, Sorvak explained as they walked. It can model relationships in 11 dimensions and project them as shifting patterns of light. It is not common for a language scholar to request access. Language is just another way of holding relationships, Lena said. Who knows, maybe the makers thought in 11 dimensions every day. Sorvak made a low, humming sound. The translator flickered and decided not to render it, labeling it only as amused uncertainty. The chamber itself was a dark sphere, large enough to hold a small house, but empty except for a circular platform in the center. The walls drank in light so completely that the space seemed infinite. A group of technicians waited near a control console embedded in the floor. A compact being of overlapping plates of metal and flesh, inclined their head toward Sorvak. The system is prepared, they said. What dataset shall we load? All recorded symbols of the makers, Sorvak replied. Every confirmed instance, every artifact. The technician paused, surprised. That will fill the field to capacity. I am aware, Sorvak said. That is the point. As the data transferred, the darkness around them began to sparkle. Single points of light appeared, then multiplied, until Lena felt as if she were standing at the center of a slowly forming galaxy. Each light flickered in its own rhythm, some brighter, some dimmer, some connected by faint lines drawn from previous analyses. Each point represents one symbol, the technician explained. Lines mark relationships we have already mapped. Frequency, adjacency, shared context, position within the lattice. Lena stepped off the platform and walked carefully into the field of lights, the system adjusting so that none of them passed through her body. They drifted aside smoothly, then flowed back after she moved on, like schools of curious fish. Can the system accept new relationships? She asked. Links that are not strictly statistical? Yes, the technician answered. We can weight connections in different ways if you define the rules. Good, Lena said softly. Then let us try a different kind of rule. She raised her hand toward a cluster of lights. These, she said, appear in patterns that rise and fall like a melody. I want them grouped as a single unit, not because of their positions, but because of their shared rhythm. Rhythm is not a measured property, the technician objected. Not in your models, Lena replied gently. But the pattern is there. Trust my choice and see what happens. Sorvak gestured for the technician to comply. The cluster of lights brightened and drew closer together. When it settled, new faint lines emerged, connecting it to other similar groups across the field. Now these, Lena continued, moving slowly. They repeat in different places, but always near clusters that feel heavy, like anchors. Mark them as anchors. Any symbol near 3 or more anchors. Group it as a weight symbol. The instructions sounded vague, but as the technicians translated her ideas into flexible rules, the field began to shift. Waves of light rolled through the chamber as symbols rearranged themselves, forming bands, spirals, and layered shells. Our models never considered subjective qualities, murmured Sorvak. We use distance, order, frequency, but not feeling. Are you certain this is not simply human imagination? Imagination is just the brain noticing shapes that numbers do not name, Lena said. Watch. She asked the system to connect clusters that repeated in cycles like refrains in a song. She grouped symbols that always appeared at turning points in the lattice, treating them as markers of transition. She linked long curves of related symbols as if they were threads in a woven cloth, where pulling one changed the shape of many. Slowly, the chaotic cloud transformed. What had first looked like random sparks became a nested structure of rings and arcs. Some curves wrapped around others, weaving in and out like braids of light. The center, a dense knot, pulsed with a steady, powerful glow. Other scholars had joined them by now, drawn by messages from Sorvak. They watched from the platform as the pattern settled into a strange, haunting beauty. What do you see? Mavir asked quietly. Lena stood very still, eyes tracking the flows. I see a life, she said. Not one person, but a whole people speaking about themselves in shapes. She pointed to the bright central knot. Here is a peak, a time when they mastered matter and energy. See how all the threads converge there, like roads leading to a shining city. Her hand moved along a spiraling path that wound outward from the center. Here, something new enters. A different pattern, almost out of tune. It intersects their paths in ways they do not expect. Sorvak watched the glowing spiral. We assumed those symbols were mathematical anomalies, he said. They did not fit any known system. They are not mistakes, Lena replied. They are a different kind of presence. To me, it feels like a stranger stepping into their story. She asked the system to highlight connections, where the strange pattern touched the central civilization thread. The chamber filled with soft lines linking the two. The contact was not brief. It spread and deepened, changing every part of the structure. You believe this is a narrative, Mavir said, their voice thoughtful. A history, not a machine? I think it is both, Lena said. A machine that tells a history. The makers used form, rhythm, repetition, and relationship the way we use words and sentences. The lattice is not simply meant to be read. It is meant to be experienced. The insectoid scholar clicked their mandibles slowly. We have always tried to flatten this structure into a sequence, they admitted. To force it into lines for our translators. But when we do, meaning falls apart. Because this is not a line, Lena said, turning slowly in the shifting light. It is a song you must hear all at once. It is a tapestry you must see as a whole. Your methods are not wrong. They are just incomplete. You gave the numbers. I gave the story. Together they finally speak. The chamber fell silent. All around them the lights pulsed gently, as if some long sleeping pattern had stirred at last. Can you show this to the Grand Assembly? Mavir asked. Lena nodded, feeling a quiet excitement rise in her chest. Yes, she said. And if I am right, this is only the first chapter. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Archives was vast enough to hold a small moon. Tiers of floating platforms formed rising circles around a central space, where a broad disk hovered above a column of light. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats, their voices blending into a low, rumbling chorus. Lena stood at the center of the disk, hands clasped in front of her to hide their slight trembling. Above her, the projection system waited, ready to replay the patterns from the resonance chamber on a scale large enough for all to see. Mavir's voice echoed gently through the hall. Honored delegates, they said, we gather to hear a report on the Aurelian lattice. For 3,000 years, our best minds have failed to unlock its meaning. The last cycle, a new approach has been tested by our human guest, Lena Rao of Earth. Today we will see the results. A hush fell over the assembly. Some beings folded wings. Others dimmed bioluminescent skin. Others drew their swirling gas forms tighter. The hall's lights lowered, and the central projection flared to life. Tiny points of light appeared first, scattered like dust. Then they moved, drawn into clusters, curves, and spirals, just as they had in the resonance chamber. The song of shapes unfolded in front of thousands of eyes, each pair or cluster or sensor array, seeing it from their own angle. Each point, Lena began, is a symbol used by the makers. Each line is a relationship found by your analyses. What you see now is what happens when we allow another kind of relationship to join the numbers. Rhythm, repetition, emotional weight, narrative shape. She walked slowly around the disk as the patterns shifted. The structure in the center is a record of their rise, she said. They learned to bend matter, energy, gravity, all within the frame of their own world. Then they reached beyond it. A new color of light glowed in the projection, marking the strange symbols that had never fit previous models. This, Lena said, is what I call the luminous fold. The makers discovered a layer of reality beyond ordinary space and time. It did not obey their usual rules. At first it was a mystery, then a danger, then an invitation. Many in the hall stirred. Theories about ancient catastrophes had filled scholarly texts for ages. Some had long believed the makers had simply destroyed themselves with their own power. We assumed the makers vanished through failure, the insectoid scholar said quietly from one of the nearer platforms, amplifying their voice so others could hear. That their silence was a warning, not a path. I thought the same for a long time, Lena admitted. But when we follow the pattern through the lattice and compare it with other artifacts, a different picture appears. She gestured, and the projection split. On one side, the main structure of the lattice. On the other, shapes drawn from smaller relics, scrolls, and carved surfaces found on distant worlds. As they aligned, shared motions and matching curves became obvious even to untrained eyes. Using the same method, Lena said, we tested our framework on 20 other major artifacts. The same story grows in all of them. At first, the makers fear the luminous fold. Then they study it. Then they begin to reshape themselves to meet it. A low murmur spread through the hall. An envoy made of ringing crystal chimed softly. You claim they did not die, they said. You claim they changed state. That is what their own record suggests, Lena replied. The lattice is not only a map of history. It is also a kind of instruction. A pattern for transferring awareness into the fold. They did not abandon their world out of defeat. They stepped sideways into another kind of existence. Some delegates fidgeted with discomfort. Others leaned forward, fascinated. This is speculation, an elder voice called from high above. It could be myth, not fact. A story they told themselves to avoid facing an ending. That is possible, Lena agreed. But the way the lattice is built is not careless. Its patterns match measured phenomena in our own physics. We see hints of the same fold in our deepest studies of gravity and quantum behavior. Their myth, if it is one, is woven with real threads. Sorvak spoke then, his voice steady. We tested the new framework on the temporal scripts of the Maker ruins in the outer spiral, he said. Using Lena's methods, we recovered detailed descriptions of energy systems far beyond our own. The methods work, even when no myth is involved. The hall grew still again as the implications settled over the crowd. New energy forms, new understandings of consciousness, vanished people who might not be truly gone. I do not suggest we rush to follow their path, Lena said. I do not even claim we should. But their language gives us a new way of thinking. They did not cut knowledge into separate boxes as we do. For them, physics and music, story and equation, inner feeling and outer measurement, all were pieces of one whole. She looked around at the many faces watching her. We have been studying this lattice as if it were a locked door, she continued. But it is less like a door and more like a bridge. It invites many kinds of minds to walk across together. Mavir stood. The council has reviewed the data, they said. We have checked and rechecked the translations on independent systems. While some details remain uncertain, it is clear that Lena's framework has opened paths where none existed before. They turned to face Lena fully. You have shown that a human perspective, shaped by brevity of life, quick intuition, and a love of story, can see what long ages of slow patience did not. We therefore establish a new division of study, devoted to integrative language and shared cognition. We ask you, Lena Rao of Earth, to lead it. For a moment, Lena could not speak. She thought of her small office on Earth, her late nights staring at undeciphered symbols on a cracked tablet, dreaming of meaning. She thought of the skeptical stares when she first arrived, and the quiet curiosity that had grown in their place. "I accept," she said finally, voice steady, not as a victory for humans over others, but as proof that every way of thinking has something unique to offer. The Maker's greatest lesson may be this: no single mind and no single species can see the whole of reality alone. Applause rose, not as a single sound but as many different sounds woven together. Chimes, clicks, whispers, pulses of light. In the projection above them, the lattice glowed softly, as if pleased that, at last, someone was starting to hear its full song. 10 years later, the stellar archives felt different. New wings had been added, filled with shared laboratories and quiet meeting spaces where scholars from 1,000 worlds worked side by side. The division of integrative language had become a living experiment in cooperation, its walls lined with symbols, diagrams, and sketches in many hands. On an observation deck high above the main ring, Lena stood with Sorvak, looking out at the swirling stars of the galactic core. The light from the great mass of suns flowed like liquid gold, veiled by thin clouds of dust. "The Council has voted," Sorvak said, his scales shifting in slow, thoughtful patterns. "The Luminous Bridge Initiative is approved." Lena exhaled slowly. She had known this moment was coming. Still, hearing the words spoken aloud gave them new weight. "So we are really going to try," she said. "We will speak into the fold. We will attempt it," Sorvak replied. Carefully, deliberately. Many still fear the unknown. They remember the long silence after the Makers vanished. Some worry that calling into that silence might wake something we are not ready to face. "Those fears are not foolish," Lena said. Even the Makers approached the fold with caution. Their lattice is full of warnings and patience. She thought of the many years since her first breakthrough. So much had changed. The translations of Maker artifacts had led to cleaner energy, safer travel, and new understanding of how awareness flows through living brains. Whole fields of study had been reborn, yet the question at the center remained. Were the Makers truly out there still, in some quiet layer of reality, listening? "How do they plan to send the message?" Lena asked. "Through shape," Sorvak said. "Not sound, not light alone. We will build a pattern that echoes the structure of the lattice using fields and waves instead of symbols on crystal. Our best physicists, artists, and meditation specialists are designing it together." Lena smiled faintly. "That sounds like something the Makers themselves would approve of." Sorvak's scales flickered with warm gold, a color Lena had learned to recognize as deep respect. "They insisted you lead the final design," he said. "You are the one who first learned to hear the lattice as more than data." "I did not do it alone," Lena replied. "I stood on the work of thousands, and I needed your patience to test something strange. Patience we have in abundance," Sorvak said. "What we lacked was your kind of leap." They fell into a comfortable silence, watching the slow turning of the stars. Below them, ships came and went from the archive docks, long-limbed vessels from old civilizations. Compact human craft, living ships grown by species who shaped biology as easily as metal. "Do you ever think about how it began?" Lena asked quietly. A single invitation to a conference, a last-minute offer to join a team that did not really expect much from me. "I remember," Sorvak said. "Some asked why we would invite a species so young. They argued your kind had not yet proven your worth in the great questions. And now?" Lena asked. "Now," Sorvak said. "Many would say that youth and restlessness were exactly what the archives needed. We older species had become comfortable in our methods. You reminded us that discovery is not only patience but also courage." Lena watched a cluster of bright stars flicker, half hidden behind a dark cloud. "The Maker's story changed us," she said. "Their way of blending inner and outer, feeling and fact, pushed us to see our own divisions more clearly. That is why the luminous bridge must be built together," Sorvak replied. "No single people will speak for the whole galaxy. The message will be woven from many minds." In the days that followed, the initiative took shape. In a vast chamber at the heart of the archives, teams of scholars, engineers, storytellers, and contemplatives gathered around a new construct. A lattice of energy, not crystal suspended in a controlled field. Its design echoed the Aurelian lattice, but it was not a copy. It was a reply. Lena walked its perimeter, offering suggestions as patterns formed and reformed. She encouraged the inclusion of motifs from many cultures, spiral songs from waterworld singers, geometric pulses from crystalline thinkers, flowing image chains from human minds. Each contribution was translated into the shared language of pattern and resonance the makers had taught them. "This is not just us speaking to them," Lena said during one late session, her voice rough with exhaustion and wonder. "It is us speaking to ourselves as well, admitting that we are many ways of seeing, not one. If anyone in the fold hears us, I want them to know that." At last, after months of refinement, the lattice of light stood ready. Its curves shone with a quiet strength, carrying within them threads of history, curiosity, and cautious hope. On the chosen day, the archives dimmed their outer lights in symbolic respect. Ships paused their departures. The grand assembly hall filled again, this time with beings watching a live projection of the luminous bridge. Lena took her place beside the main controls, with Sorvak and other leaders nearby. The air hummed with a subtle tension, as if the very walls were holding their breath. "We do not know if anyone will answer," Maevir said to the gathered crowd. "We do not know if our message will even be understood, but silence has been our only choice for millions of years. Today, guided by the Maker's own language, we choose to speak." Lena placed her hand on the activation panel. For a heartbeat, she thought of her early fear, of all the ways this might fail. Then she remembered the feeling she had the first time she saw the Aurelian lattice, that the past was not dead. "Only waiting if you are there," she whispered softly, more to herself than to the hall. "We are ready to listen." The lattice of light flared. Waves of patterned energy rolled outward, shaped by the design they had created together. Instruments confirmed that the signal had slipped into the subtle layer of reality their physics barely understood, vanishing from ordinary space like a song fading beyond hearing. For a long moment, nothing changed. The hall remained quiet. Outside, the galaxy continued its endless turning. Then, in the observation data streaming across the consoles, something small and unexpected flickered. A tiny echo returned, not matching any known natural pattern. It was faint, almost nothing at all, yet its shape carried a familiar kind of order. Not the same as the original lattice, but close enough to make hearts race. "We received something," a technician gasped. "It is weak, but it is patterned." Lena stared at the display. The echo climbed and curved in a way that stirred a deep recognition in her mind. Not words, not even a full reply, more like the first note of a distant melody. She felt a smile spread across her face, slow and full. "They heard us," she said quietly. Or someone did. Around her, the hall filled with soft sounds of amazement, of relief, of wonder. The fear did not vanish, but it was joined now by a new feeling, the sense that a long-held question had finally earned a gentle, mysterious hint of answer. Later, when Lena and Sorvak stood once more at the observation deck, the stars seemed different, though of course they were the same. Perhaps it was simply that now, when she looked at them, she no longer saw silent lights. She saw possible listeners. "They studied a language they believed was dead for ages," Sorvak murmured, watching the glow of the galactic core. "Yet it was only sleeping, waiting for someone who could hear it. And now," Lena replied, "we begin a new story. Not about a vanished people, but about what happens when many minds learn to listen together." The stars ahead pulsed softly, as if winking in quiet agreement. Somewhere, in the unseen folds between worlds, a faint pattern drifted toward them, patient and steady, carrying the promise that the conversation had only just begun. If you enjoyed this story, you can invite your viewers to share their thoughts in the comments, support the channel with a like, and explore more stories that awaken curiosity and imagination.